Okay, guys. So I want to talk about the Democrats making their move on the shutdown because I think that Chuck Schumer, as a divisive figure as he is in Democratic Party politics right now, and where the future of Democratic leadership should go. Not just him, by the way. Hakeem Jeffries is also controversial, but Chuck Schumer has caught the majority of that controversy, especially about 5 or 6 months earlier this year, when there was a different opportunity to use the 60 votes that was necessary for a continuing resolution, and Chuck Schumer let it go because he estimated that at that point it was not strategically an intelligent decision. That got him a lot of slack. His general age and presence in Democratic Party politics for a while, the general opinion of the Democratic Party being pretty low. There's a general feeling within not only the wider American public, but within the Democratic Party base that it's time for Schumer to move on. You're saying Schumer did the right thing? Actually, here's my hot take. I think Schumer, in retrospect, but I even said that it had some validity at the time, but especially in retrospect, probably made the right decision to wait until later, especially since the court decisions that were being made earlier on to limit the Trump administration's power. One of the ways people talk about how you could compromise those courts, especially if Donald Trump had a reason to want to undermine the system by getting a ton of losses in a row and no victories, so no validation of his agenda, would be by defunding the government and making it harder and harder for the courts to operate. Obviously, that would take a lot of time. Obviously, that would come with a lot of controversy. But as there was more and more gutting of the federal government by Doge and by Elon Musk's stooges who are going around to storied, storied government officials and civil servants with like 40, 50 years of experience in their field, and they're saying, okay, so can you tell me what motivates your work? Hmm. What's the best and worst part of your day? Mm-hmm. And how many days do you hail the dear leader? Like it just questions from people with a lack of experience. Again, I'm exaggerating slightly, only slightly, with a lack of experience in those fields, who shouldn't be asking these people whether or not they should exist in those positions, and then cutting people who they then have to go back and rehire because they realize afterwards, wait, maybe the nuclear safety people actually had a role here, which was nuclear safety, so we don't have another 3 Mile Island. Okay, uh, 3 Mile Island, by the way, for those who were born within the last 20 to 25 years, was an atomic disaster for America's history. We didn't have many fatalities, but it really turned the American public against atomic power. I think it's actually poisoned the public's mind against it. I think that was a tragic consequence of it, not only, of course, to the locals who were terrified, but I think when it comes to the diversification we could have had in our energy grid if we had made earlier investments into atomic power, which I am a proponent of. I'm getting a little off topic. Point is, Democratic leadership was pretty unpopular. Then Democrats won this recent myriad of special election. And when I say won, I mean they won in Virginia, they won in New Jersey, they won in Georgia, they won in Connecticut, they won in everywhere there was an election. Anywhere that there was something happening, they won, and they won by much larger margins than expected. People expected the gubernatorial race in New Jersey to be close. The Democratic candidate won by 13 points. People expected the race in Virginia to be closer. They expected Democratic victory, but expected it to be closer. And again, it was double. We're talking about double-digit margins, and the Democratic majority in the House of Representatives jumping 51 to 49, being the divide in the Virginia legislature, to 65 to in the 30s. I mean, we're talking like 65 to 35 now. That's a radical transformation in Virginian state level politics. And they even won with a failed, I would say not failed, flawed candidate in Jay Jones, who had a massive leak scandal of text that came out of him speculating about whether or not the death of their opponent's children would, in a horrific shooting, would change their opinion on certain, American political issues. And he was talking about, like, if I had a gun and all these bullets and it was Hitler, Stalin, and this Republican in the room, I would go for the Republican twice. He was just going in there, posting like he was in a Discord channel that you hope never leaks, and it leaked, and he still won, not by a tiny bit, not by a slim margin, not by an overwhelming margin like in the other races, but by a comfortable margin. Now, why did Democrats perform this way? I would say this is due to a myriad of reasons, and this is leading up to why I think Chuck Schumer is making the move that he's making right now. I think the first reason is that Donald Trump failed miserably on the economy, and he has no response to it. That Donald Trump's linchpin for his economic agenda, where he was telling the American people that we're going to place these tariffs, that these tariffs are going to make the foreigner pay, and then you're finally going to get your fair share. Now, putting aside the fact that the Supreme Court is currently deciding whether or not these tariffs are legal, and from the way that even conservative justices on the Supreme Court are talking, seems to be that there's a decent likelihood that they're going to be struck down as illegal and unconstitutional, and that throws into question whether or not the government can even possess the money that they've taken so far. And there's going to have to be some decision on whether they keep that money, whether they have to give that money back to the companies that they tax it from, whether or not that the money that they've already paid out and used for things, what do they do in that situation? I mean, there's a huge controversy around whether or not they can go through with the tariffs, but it is a large tax on American consumers. It was passed down to businesses and it was passed down to consumers. And the purpose of this tax was to bring back American manufacturing. And when you look at American manufacturing, it has not been brought back. And it's not been brought back for a few reasons. Number one, it's, these tariffs were only placed recently. That's probably one of the best Republican defenses of this. But number two, the tariffs, we don't know if they're going to stay. Number one, because we don't know if they're legal. So if you're someone who's like, oh, I'm going to invest in the United States. Before I wasn't. Now I am, because these tariffs make it so that I can operate this business untaxed in comparison to my competition, and I can sell to the American public at a higher price than they would have bought the product before, but a lower price than our competition that has to import it, which means higher prices for U.S. consumers, but possibly more jobs domestically in the United States. The problem is if you don't know if it's legal, and since Donald Trump, Mr. Art of the Deal, didn't pass it through Congress and it gets struck down, what businessman is going to make multi-billion-dollar industrial investments based off of maybe this tariff stays in place in a little bit? Not to mention the way that they've talked about these tariffs is maybe they'll stay, maybe they'll go, there'll be a baseline, but they've been very wishy-washy with these tariffs. A lot of these tariffs have been negotiable. And so if the tariffs might not be legal and also seem to be partially negotiable, it makes it very difficult to convince any business that now is the time necessarily to move. And so we have not seen that large-scale industrial investment in the United States in partnership with that. Not to mention the haphazard way in which it was done, like a sledgehammer, meant that the existing industrial base in the United States, for example, auto manufacturers, that is heavily reliant on foreign components that to import.
Donald Trump and his MAGA maniacs are a bunch of risless poo kegs. Everyone who supports Ukraine has a big one, or big ones if they're a chick. Slava Ukraini. You the man, Dylan biceps.
I don't know who sent that message. Thank you for the $20. But I assume that was the Snopes fact checker who had checked into our stream to drop only things that have been peer reviewed. Only things that have been peer reviewed. So Donald Trump, his tariff policy has led to not only not a manufacturing boom, because these automakers have had to import complex parts. Those complex parts cost more now. They've tried to put some exceptions in place, but the tariffs might go away because are they even legal? And they seem to be negotiable. Not only did we not see a manufacturing boom in the United States, we actually lost manufacturing jobs while Donald Trump has been in office. So we're moving in the opposite direction. As the Trump administration tells people, just wait. Mind you, just wait is a lot different than how he's talking on the campaign trail, which is, on my first day in office, I'm going to institute a bunch of policies that are going to see an immediate lowering of grocery prices, which did not happen, which is going to see an immediate rising of the standard of living. There's going to see the cost of living go down. Going to see, gas price, all these things go down. And he talked about it as if it was something that was locked in, for sure going to happen, just like he talked about ending the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, and that was not delivered upon. And when that was not delivered upon, and his, economic linchpin ended up just being one of the largest taxes on American consumers in U.S. history, placed on them by bypassing Congress, and the American public said, wait, why is it that bananas actually cost more now? Because of this tariff. Wait, why is it that we haven't seen the situation improve? Wait, why is it that the job market has actually gotten worse, not better, in the last 10 months, even crossing over into a period where there are more unemployed people than there are open U.S. jobs? and you see the headline, worst since 2008. A lot more now. All worrying economic indicators. The amount of personal debt in this country is increasing. The amount of federal workers who are now having to go without pay while continuing to work, and how their requisite communities around them, the restaurants, those who rely on their purchasing power. Like, I come from Prince George's County. That's a county with a lot of federal workers. They're obviously being without not only those federal workers' income, and those people are affected, but the people around them, their barbers, the grocery stores they go to, the restaurants that they frequent, the daycares that they pay out to, the babysitters that they hire, every sector of the dog groomers. If we're talking about, somebody with a fluffy, tiny dog, it doesn't matter. All the people in their economic circle are affected. And so it hasn't been at some economic collapse, but the situation has not improved, and in many factors has actually gotten worse, leading to Donald Trump taking some of his biggest polling hits on the economy. I think that's a really big factor. It does not help that when Donald Trump is asked about these problems, he reacts by essentially saying the situation is not as you painted. The problem is that if you talk the way that Donald Trump talks in the clip I'm about to show you, while people go out to the grocery store and actually still have to pay more, that lived reality is going to trump this fake reality. Even the Russian state press is not this bad. When you read the Russian state press, they will talk about grocery prices. They'll even talk about the risk of a recession to the Russian economy and why it probably even looks inevitable. But they'll talk about it in order to prepare the Russian public, because they know some truths they can cover up, some lived realities they can't. Trump might actually, when it comes to this vector, be a little less complex than this type of media operators, due to the fact that, again, this is lived reality. This isn't like something you can lie about, a voting machine or something, because people can't see the voting machine. People see the price tag.
They talked about that. They said, oh, I don't want to talk about affordability. The reason I don't want to talk about affordability is because everybody knows that it's far less expensive under Trump than it was under Sleepy Joe Biden. And the prices are way down. Caroline?
Yes, sir.
Could you discuss that question?
Can you discuss? Not me. Can you discuss? By the way, I wanted to give some shout outs to this photographer here. I don't know if you guys know the fantastic work of the people who get paid on the daily by Getty Images. This is Andrew Harnick, who took pictures of Donald Trump's Oval Office meeting yesterday. He had an event yesterday where he was passing out actively passing out. And when you are the oldest president in U.S. history who's going to be ending his term in his 80s, this is something that is going to have an effect. This campaign trail, he was a lot less active, did a lot less speeches, did a lot less events than the last time. And so I think another problem is not only that his countenance is bad, but Trump is not nearly as vocal or on the campaign trail as he used to be. Back in the day, Trump would do constant campaign event. Even between 2016 and 2020, he would still do campaign events. He doesn't really do that in the same frequency as he used to. And so I think Trump slowing down might also be one of the effects that undercut the election, especially since he's not on the ballot. And so if he's slowing down slightly and he's not on the ballot, getting those Trump voters to come out and turn out for him is a problem. Oh man, this is my favorite one right here. And this one's beautiful. But again, I got to go back to his response to economic questions, because one issue I wanted to put forward is that Donald Trump recently, to counter everything, he said that, look, the Walmart Thanksgiving meal costs less than what it did under Joe Biden a year ago. The problem is that the Walmart Thanksgiving meal a year ago offered 21 items. Now it offers 15. So in order to cut the prices, in order to reach low, I don't want to use the word low value, but I would want to say low income consumers, instead of raising the price, they decided to actually slice the amount of items in the Thanksgiving meal so they could lower the price slightly. Because if they didn't, they would actually have had to raise the price, when right now consumers are deal hunting. They're bargain hunting. They're looking in that bargain bin. They're looking at those dented cans, and they're seeing opportunities to save their dimes in a period where a lot of Americans have a lot of economic anxiety. When this fact was presented to Trump during a meeting with Viktor Orban, he just denied that it was happening.
And since you brought up the Walmart Thanksgiving meal, and it is cheaper, but it also contains less, As affordability.
Well, I haven't heard that. You're telling me. Who are you with? Who are you with?
I'm with NBC News, sir.
Fake news. NBC. You're fake news. What a NBC's gone down the tubes along with most of the rest of them.
And that's what we get. And that's what we get. Trump says something, he gets confronted by a journalist for it not being true, and he has fallen so much into these isms, fake news, Democrats, or whatever it could be, just these like little things he can throw out there, that's the end of it. This, back during the previous presidency, would be a much bigger scandal than it is now, but the politics has just been so normalized like this. And so that leads us to where we are now with Democrats. I think he failed on the economy. I think Democrats focused on issues of affordability much better, and that led to their victory as well. And I think that Democrats, while focusing on Trump, didn't make it the main focus of the campaign. They made it a part of the campaign. They didn't take the worst conclusion they could have from last election, which is let's not talk about Trump at all. While Trump is right now unpopular, he's down in the 30s, which he's at his second term low. If you have an unpopular incumbent, you want to talk about that in the first midterm since that election. You want to talk about that, but you can't make that the primary focus of your campaign. You have to be aspirational in campaign and talk about what you want to do. And Spamberger, Mamdani, you can look at across the board. These are all people who talked about affordability and talked about it aspirationally while still keeping Trump as part of their campaign. That motivated a lot of people, and the polling seems to indicate this, a lot of people to come out and turn out against Trump to show their opposition to the government. So it was able to balance an aspirational vision with the power that comes from Trump being on the ballot, not only for Republicans, because Trump motivates their people to come out, but also motivates the same people against Trump when he's not on the ballot, which is a problem for Republicans, because if he's on the ballot, it can motivate Trump's voters. When he's on the ballot, he can motivate Trump's voters. But if he's off the ballot and it still motivates Democrats, that's a strategic problem for Republicans. But with the economy being the big loser for Donald Trump this election, and also losing so badly with young women. But I mean, if you're the guy who overturned Roe versus Wade, I mean, that's not going to be too surprising. But that was also a big winner for Mamdani, for Spamberger in Virginia, in New Jersey. I think in New Jersey, they broke 57% for Trump. Women did. Young women were breaking for margins on Democrats like of 78 to 80%, like mega margins. But out of all of this, the economy still the big loser for Trump. Something that he always pulled ahead for Democrats on. Now he's polling piss poor on it. And it's the thing that if you polled people in the exit polls was a big motivator for a lot of the people coming out to vote. For example, in Virginia, where we saw some of the biggest gains, the number one issue for people leaving exit polls was the economy. So Democrats see this. They see, this is the midst of a shutdown that they get all these victories. And a lot of people like Chris Murphy from Connecticut, the senator from Connecticut, have the idea that now is not the time you back down. Now is the time that you would dig in after getting this positive affirmation from voters. Other Democrats are saying, hey, now that we've got the victory, rest on our laurels, accept some maybe smaller compromise or, negotiate to have a vote at a later date and stop the shutdown. So I was curious to see what Chuck Schumer was going to do, as Chuck Schumer made the decision earlier this year not to engage in politics that could have led to a shutdown, but this time chose to stand his ground on extending the Obamacare tax credits that will help stop premium increases and make affordable healthcare available to more Americans. As these cuts in healthcare only save money when care is denied. Okay, there's this idea of the healthy person sitting on his couch just collecting healthcare. They make healthcare costs come from when healthcare services are provided. So a healthy person on the couch, as Mike Johnson has defined, that's not going to happen. So focusing on this economic issue, premium increases, the Obama ACA tax credit extensions, which are 75% popular, focusing on this, I think, helped Democrats. And so what is Chuck Schumer going to do? Well, he's not going to completely back off. He's not going to say, you know what, let's just agree to have a vote at a later date, take the earlier Republican proposal. But he doesn't seem to be digging in towards, we need to have an ACA extension for 3 years, for 4 years. We need to just completely enshrine existing law for years and years to come. He has instead put forward a proposal to extend the ACA subsidies to stop those rapid premium increases from plans changing on January 1st and to stop these people from losing many people from losing access to health insurance by extending it for 1 year till the midterms, and then after the midterms seemingly with a new Congress, which Democrats would hope would be Democratic controlled, Republicans would hope the opposite. But with the momentum, current trajectory leans one way towards the Democrats, then they can renegotiate to see if they can extend it further under maybe a new framework. So that seems to be Chuck Schumer's deal that he is putting forward. That's what he announced here in this speech. We'll play a little bit of it so you can hear the tone from Chuck Schumer, who continues to lead Senate Democrats at a period where more and more of the base are wary of his leadership.
Speech amid the record-long
working for either party and isn't working for the American people. Democrats have said we must address the health care crisis. But Republicans have repeatedly said they won't negotiate to lower the health care costs until the government reopens. So let's find a path to honor both positions. Democrats would like to see an end to this shutdown, and we want to respect Leader Thune's desire not to negotiate on ACA until after the government reopens. Therefore, we'd like to offer a simple proposal that would reopen the government and extend the ACA premium tax credits simultaneously, and then have the opportunity to start negotiating longer-term solutions to health care costs. Let's do all three. I've spoken with my caucus, and Democrats are offering a very simple compromise. Democrats are ready to clear the way to quickly pass a government funding bill that includes health care affordability. Leader Thune just needs to add a clean one-year extension of the ACA tax credits to the CR so that we can immediately address rising health care costs. That's not a negotiation. It's an extension of current law, something we do all the time around here, as we all know. But we also offer this. Let's create a bipartisan committee that will continue negotiations after the government reopens on reforms ahead of next year's enrollment period to provide long-term certainty that health care costs will be more affordable. This proposal reopens the government and ensures working families who are shopping right now for their health care get certainty and financial relief. While open enrollment has begun, insurers can update their rates after we pass a simple extension of the tax credits.
So that's their offer, an offer of a one-year extension of the previous existing ACA tax credits, which will probably, which would last till after the midterm election. Now, that's their price tag. 1 year. 1 year ACA extension, and a bipartisan committee to continue negotiations. Now, the latter half, a committee to negotiate, a committee to talk, that's not going to be the big sticking point. But there are going to be Republicans who don't want to give this 1 year extension. Thune has already described it as a non-starter, even though after this was announced and after they said that, oh, that's a non-starter, they did enter. Republican and Democratic senators did enter negotiations in private. So how much it's a non-starter or whether they're going to negotiate something, trimmed down, I do not know. Republicans keep saying that any extension of ACA tax credits would have to be done with substantial reform. Exactly what that reform would look like, we do not know at this stage, and if they could even put together a plan for reform so quickly to be ready for the new year before these subsidies, before these tax credits get cut, and before premiums skyrocket, with some people already hearing about their premiums going up. That's also going to be a challenge for Senate and House leadership. Now, I will say, at the same time that this move is being done, another pressure is building, and that has to do with SNAP cuts. So one out of every 8 Americans rely on SNAP benefits. A very substantial portion of the country, and it is across a myriad of both Democrat and Republican states. Now, SNAP is funded, obviously, by the government. And with the government shutdown, the funds to, give to SNAP are strained. Now, there is an emergency fund of $4.9 billion that SNAP could rely on in order to keep funding people through this month, through November. Now, Donald Trump has announced, even though previously he had said that he could use that fund to provide SNAP benefits through a shutdown, trying to show his navigability and flexibility and leadership. He then later said that actually they would not do that because we have to make difficult decisions in a shutdown, and they would not actually be making any SNAP benefits, and that's what they would move to do. Now, a federal judge came out and said, no, Trump, you are not allowed to do that. You have to fund federal SNAP benefits through November. That is not legal. You have to use the tools at your disposal to make sure that the people who are relying on these programs, the federal government has, decided that they deserve, that they get those funds if they are available to you. And so the federal judge ordered Trump to fully fund SNAP benefits through the month of November. And this is going on at the same time that Chuck Schumer is throwing out this 1 year extension proposal. The Trump administration responded to it by saying that it won't pay any SNAP benefits during the shutdown, that they're still going to fight to not do it. Then the Trump administration seek to block full SNAP payments, talking about now, well, maybe we can make like partial payments instead of full payments. We don't want to have to make payments, but maybe we could do partial payments instead. And so the Trump administration seems to be fighting tooth and nail in every way they can to try to either reduce SNAP payments to vulnerable families, families with food vulnerability, or cut them altogether. With the former being the tune that they are singing now, that they've been met with federal court orders that they have to make these payments out as soon as possible, and they're still trying to maneuver around it. The longer this drags out, the worse it is going to be for Republicans. Republicans know that they control the legislature. They know that the American public know this. And so if the government shuts down, the first people that the public are going to look to blame is likely going to be those who control the government. It's going to be your job to serve a convincing narrative that it wasn't your fault. To say, well, Democrats came in and said, the only way we will fund the government is if you give every American a free puppy or something along. You show how ridiculous their position is and your commitment to the legislative tradition of the filibuster. And then maybe you can shift the public against the opposition. Problem is that when they try to engage in that debate and say, come on, we should be passing a clean CR, Democrats respond, we want to continue the ACA tax credit extension that is overwhelmingly popular with the American public, with the last poll I saw showing that 75% of Americans want to see that tax credit extended. And that's not even talking about whether or not everybody would fully realize the effects of that, of not having that tax credit extension, as people who are not even on Obamacare, who are not on these programs, could still see their premiums increase in tandem with these ACA cuts. So if they have to have a debate about that, Republicans are going to be stuck in the position that Donald Trump has not put forward a reformative health care plan since he promised one in the campaign trail of 2015. It's been a decade, and we haven't seen any plan put forward. The Republicans tried to kill Obamacare in the House. John McCain stopped them without any plan to replace it. And so if Donald Trump has been without a health care plan for a decade, I do not expect Donald Trump to come out with one in the next few months during this debate in order to counter this point. And so if they enter that debate, or if that's the debate that they want to fight on, then they're going to have to talk about an issue that they don't have a plan for, or not a claim, or a stated plan from the Trump administration, and where the Democratic position is the more popular position. While again, they're the ones who control the government. If one believes that a clean CR after they already negotiated these cuts, or at least passed these cuts with the big beautiful bill, it should be passed on principle. I'm sure with those people that Democrats don't look fantastic right now, but with the plurality of Americans, they blame the Republicans.
Morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
Anja, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. So if you look at it from that perspective, there is a lot of political benefit for the Democrats, irrespective of any pain caused, for taking a stand here, talking about the issue that is winning for them, the economy, and talking about an issue that Trump is weak on, healthcare, and that they pull good on, extending the ACA tax credits, while also being able to show strength when Democrats are largely viewed as spineless, not only by the wider American public, but also by their base. But there is a counterance to this. And this is why I think Chuck Schumer's 1-year extension instead of we need to have a multi-year, like something where you could dig in and say, I can do this for 2 months. I can do this for 3 months. Let Republicans dig their own grave. Let's take a strong position where we can campaign across the country and tell them about our healthcare plans. The reason why that's not a good idea is, number one, government shutdowns are bad, generally speaking, right? They're bad for investor confidence. If you're a foreign company and you're thinking about setting up shop in the United States and you're hearing about these federal shutdowns, and it's the longest shutdown in U.S. history. It's not just that the government shut down, but it's the longest shutdown in U.S. history. You're going to have questions about the safety of your investment. Now, a lot of people would go forward anyway, knowing that America is a well-developed country with a strong, fiscal backbone, and that they have a certain amount of property rights and stability that goes back decades and decades and decades. So for most businessmen, that might not have an impact. But when economic growth bonuses around Christmas time can be dependent upon 2 to 3% growth rates or 4 to 5% loss rates, convincing more businessmen to come and invest here, especially when you're trying to create the manufacturing boom by taxing Americans, it just doesn't doesn't seem good for the country. Doesn't seem good for the country. Not to mention the fact that certain services like SNAP are facing pressure. Not to mention certain non-governmental agencies that have been providing services to the American public. For example, Meals on Wheels, certain NGOs could shutter their doors without federal funding, with some of them possibly never reopening again. There's, of course, lastly, the problem with federal workers, many of them being furloughed, and the increasing danger at American airports as more and more TSA and more importantly, air traffic controllers, with us having a shortage of 3,500 air traffic controllers nationwide, call in sick or just play straight hooky from work because they haven't been able to pay their families' food bills, their mortgage bills, their utility bills. And they've been told, oh, well, we'll pay you when this is all done. At the same time, when Donald Trump is speculating about whether certain federal workers, while not elaborating, should get back pay, which is one way to encourage people to stay the fuck home and take an extended break. And this has led to Sean Duffy, the transportation secretary, making 5% cuts, 10% cuts. And that's bad for the country. Of course, that's bad for Trump's image, but it's also bad for federal workers. And I do not believe the Democrat leadership benefits, or really any American benefits, from federal workers who are supposed to be serving us, who are civil servants that are supposed to be keeping the country stable, supposed to be helping the country protect us, by them not being able to feed their families and them having to stand at food lines that have gotten longer and longer during this shutdown. The idea of an air traffic controller working 6 days a week, taking overtime, taking on their previous colleagues' work roles due to mass and staffing shortages, that was a problem even before the shutdown, only to go home after working till knows what ungodly hour and say, hello, honey, I can't come home to play with the kids right now. I need to stop by the food bank first because we don't have anything to fill the fridge. It's just not good for the country, but it's also bad for Democrats because Democrats are a party that have put themselves in union power, and a lot of these federal workers unions have come out and said, make a deal, make a deal, make a deal. Some have even come out in support of a clean CR because they want to get payments to the workers as soon as possible. And so there's a problem with these worker unions, but there's also a problem with a lot of these federal workers tend to lean towards the Democratic Party. And so a lot of times you're going to be not only hurting the American people more broadly, which should be of a concern to you. From a purely political standpoint, though, a lot of these people are Democrats. And so they're going to be getting a lot of complaints from Democrats who are going to be told, keep working, don't get paid, but don't worry, this is for health care that might affect them or might not affect them. The premium increase might affect them. It might, or it might not. They might be outside of that plan. They might have a plan as a federal worker that is not going to be affected, or they might have one that is. Either way, there is also counter pressures, which makes sense in the deal that Chuck Schumer ultimately put forward, which is, I think, a general compromise from what he put forward earlier, which might have been the strategy from the beginning. Aim for the stars, might hit the moon. And so a 1-year ACA extension seems like a middle ground position where they don't ask for something too crazy, while they also are standing on principle and on the issue that they know that they can win on, and they know that the American public supports them in. So I think this is Chuck Schumer and the Democrats making their move and throwing their dice forward, making their gambit in the eyes of the American public when it comes to negotiating with Republicans, and also when it comes to trying to deal with the counter pressures that come from the struggles that federal workers and many Americans are going through during the shutdown. And not to mention that $4.9 billion emergency fund, even if Trump's proposal to, strike down that court order, trying to maneuver around it, even if that does not work and they have to make out these payments, $4.9 billion will run out. And when they run out of the emergency fund, when this record-breaking shutdown continues to set records and go further and further and further, when we reach truly uncharted territory, what then? That's why a deal sooner better than a deal later.